The night our alpha died, the pack didn't lose its leader, it lost its illusion. Rain traced silver lines down the glass walls of the council hall, blurring the forest beyond into something soft and distant. Inside, everything was sharp. Stone floors, steel beams, 40 wolves standing in disciplined silence, and Arthur Kane, our alpha for 23 years, lying still on the raised slab at the center of the room. He looked smaller without the weight of authority pressing into his spine. Power adds inches to a man. Take it away, and gravity collects its debt. The scent of iron lingered beneath pine resin and cedar polish. No one cried. Wolves don't perform grief in public. We contain it. We file it away for later. I stood where I always stood. Second row, left side. Not in front. Never in front. That space belonged to the alpha. But every wolf in this room knew whose strategies secured our trade routes, whose negotiations kept neighboring packs from testing our borders, whose revisions balanced budgets Arthur had nearly shattered in his final years. Mine. I adjusted the cuff of my charcoal coat. Breathing steady. Heart rate stable. Control intact. Chaos is expensive. Lucas. Velma Rourke slid up beside me, her heels whispering against stone. She smelled like expensive perfume layered carefully over sharp calculation. You're very calm, she murmured. I prefer it, I said. Her lips curved. Some of us are grieving. Some of us are calculating, I replied. Velma didn't argue. She didn't need to. We both understood the same truth. Arthur's death wasn't just emotional. It was structural. At the front of the hall, the council members stepped forward. Old men. Older traditions, their expressions carved from marble. Arthur Kane, one of them began, voice echoing softly against glass and wood, led this pack with strength and honor. I kept my face neutral. Strength. Yes, honor was negotiable. The speech went on. Words about legacy, stability, continuity. That last one almost made me smile. Continuity required competence. The council speaker finally inhaled. By blood and by vote, the successor to the Kane line steps forward. A subtle shift moved through the room. Shoulders straightened, scent sharpened. Anticipation coiled low and electric. Then he stepped out of the shadow. Killian Kane, 27. Broad-shouldered but lean. Dark hair brushed back from his forehead in a way that looked careless and wasn't. His suit was black, clean lines, no ornament, confidence without decoration. His posture wasn't arrogant. It was inevitable. The air changed when he moved. Not because he pushed it. Because he didn't. Some alphas project dominance like a weapon. Killian carried it like gravity. Constant. Unforced. He stopped beside his father's body. Bowed his head once. No theatrics. No shaking breath. Then he lifted his gaze. It found me immediately. Of course it did. The contact wasn't accidental. His eyes were a sharp, unsettling gray. Not cold, not warm. Assessing. I held his stare. Silence stretched between us. No one else noticed. Or maybe they did, and pretended not to. I studied him the way I studied market fluctuations or territorial maps. Posture. Micro movements. Breathing pattern. He didn't fidget. Didn't swallow. Didn't blink first. Interesting. Killian Kane, the council voice declared, is hereby recognized as Alpha of the Northwood Pack. A murmur rippled outward like a low tide. Killian stepped forward to address us. I won't waste your time, he said. His voice was lower than I expected. Controlled. No tremor. My father built this pack on power. I intend to build it on precision. A faint tightening in my chest. Precision. That word wasn't accidental. His gaze shifted across the room, traders, enforcers, council members, and then returned to me. And I know I won't do that alone. A ripple of reaction passed through the hall. Subtle, but there. Velma leaned closer. He's either very brave, she whispered, or very foolish. Brave, I murmured. Why? Foolish men overcompensate. Killian's mouth tilted almost imperceptibly, as if he'd heard us despite the distance. The rain struck harder against the glass. Something tightened beneath my ribs. Not fear. Recognition. This wasn't a boy inheriting a crown. This was a wolf who understood that the crown was decorative, and that the real architecture of power lived elsewhere. In strategy, in structure, in me. Heat flickered low and unwelcome at the base of my spine. Instinct reacting to proximity, to the steady weight of an alpha who didn't posture. I ignored it. I don't bend for titles. Killian held my gaze 1 second longer than necessary. Challenge accepted. The council concluded the ceremony. Wolves began to disperse, voices low, careful. Velma exhaled. Well, Lucas. Congratulations. For what? You just became the most important man in the room. I watched Killian move through the crowd, wolves parting without being asked. No, I said quietly. We'll see. She arched a brow. You don't think he'll last? I studied the line of Killian's shoulders, the quiet confidence, the deliberate pacing. Every pack eats weak leaders alive. He won't survive this, I said. But for the first time in years, I wasn't entirely certain I was right. The morning after Arthur Kane's funeral, the council hall smelled like polish and restraint. By noon, it smelled like ambition. Killian didn't wait a week to assert control. He called his first strategic assembly at 9 a.m. sharp, no ceremonial delay, no performative mourning period. Just a message delivered through the internal network. Mandatory attendance. Operations review. Efficient. I walked the upper corridor overlooking the main floor of the administrative wing. Glass walls on one side, open sightlines on the other. Below, department heads moved in tight, anxious clusters. Finance, security, trade, border enforcement. They were waiting to see if the new Alpha would roar. Or trip. The Alpha's office sat at the far end of the hall. All steel, wood, and floor-to-ceiling windows facing the forest. Minimalist. Clean lines. No excessive decor. Arthur's heavy oak desk had been replaced with a sleek slab of black stone. Symbolic. Arthur liked tradition. Killian preferred control. I entered without knocking. He was standing by the window, hands loosely clasped behind his back, suit jacket discarded over the chair. White shirt sleeves rolled once. Not careless, calculated. Lucas, he said without turning. Good. I was about to send for you. I don't respond well to summons, I replied. That earned a faint curve of his mouth. He turned then, gray eyes alert but unreadable. Sit. I remained standing. He didn't repeat himself. Interesting. The meeting began 5 minutes later. Department heads filed in, tension prickling through the room like static before lightning. Killian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. We'll start with trade, he said calmly. Our export margins have declined 3% over the last quarter. Velma stiffened slightly. He continued. Not because of market fluctuation. Because our transport insurance rates haven't been renegotiated since last year's border incident. Velma blinked. That was my father's oversight, Killian finished smoothly. We'll correct it. I've already scheduled the call. A ripple of surprise. I watched. He moved through each department with unsettling precision. Security protocols tightened at the northern ridge. Supply chain rerouted to avoid increased surveillance from the Eastbrook pack. 2 minor contracts quietly terminated. No hesitation, no posturing, no mistake. By the time the meeting ended, I had gone through every figure he cited on my tablet. Every number checked out. I disliked that more than I would have disliked an error. The others filtered out, murmuring in low voices. I stayed. Killian closed the glass doors behind the last council member and leaned casually against his desk. You're quiet, he said. I'm verifying. And? No immediate incompetence detected. He laughed softly. High praise. I crossed my arms. You memorized those figures. I reviewed them. You internalized structural weaknesses that took me 6 months to identify. A pause. His gaze sharpened. And you're irritated because I did it in 6 weeks. There it was. I held his stare. Impressive doesn't mean sustainable. No, he agreed. It means prepared. The silence between us wasn't hostile. It was measured. He stepped closer. Not invading, not pushing. Just enough to test proximity. You built the framework that keeps this pack stable, he said quietly. You think I don't know that? My jaw tightened. You're the strategist, he continued. The mind behind the machine. And you're the crown. A crown, he corrected, is decorative. My pulse ticked once, sharp and unwelcome. He wasn't trying to dominate me. He was aligning. That was more dangerous. You're being observed, he said softly. I'm aware. No, he replied, eyes holding mine steadily. You're being studied. The air shifted. A low instinctive awareness coiled under my skin. The wolf inside me registering presence, strength, intent. I don't react like that. Not to anyone. You don't have to challenge me to prove your worth, Killian said. I already know it. That unsettled me more than any threat could have. Alphas usually test, push, bite. He didn't. He was calibrating. And what do you intend to do with that knowledge? I asked. A faint smirk. Survive. I studied him then, really studied him. No arrogance, no insecurity, no frantic need to assert dominance. Just focus. A flicker of something unfamiliar pressed against my ribs. Respect. I hated it. The crown may have been ceremonial, but the wolf wearing it wasn't pretending. The first provocation came 3 days later. Eastbrook didn't bother with subtlety. Their scent marked the steel fencing along our northern industrial border. Thick, deliberate, territorial. A torn insignia from one of our freight trucks lay half buried in gravel like a calling card. The industrial district sat where forest met concrete. Warehouses lined the tree edge, tall and gray, backed by miles of pine. Smoke from distant factories blended with the clean bite of winter air. I stood with the security unit near the fence, hands in my coat pockets. Minimal damage, one of the enforcers said. Just marking. Testing, I corrected. Testing our reaction. Behind me, tires crunched over gravel. Killian stepped out of a black SUV, coat collar turned up against the wind. He didn't rush, didn't bark orders. The enforcers straightened automatically anyway. I watched him assess the fence, the insignia, the pattern of claw marks. What do you think? He asked without looking at me. They want visibility, I said. If we respond loudly, we validate the move. And if we don't, they escalate slowly. We control the tempo. He nodded once. Then he surprised me. Call the media liaison, he said to the security captain. We're holding a border inspection at sunset. I turned sharply. That's unnecessary. It's strategic. It's theatrical. His gray eyes shifted to mine. Sometimes, he said evenly, strength must be seen. Strength that needs to be seen isn't strength, I replied. A few enforcers glanced between us. The wind cut across the gravel lot, sharp and cold. Killian stepped closer, voice low enough for only me to hear. You prefer silence. I prefer efficiency. And I prefer deterrence. We held each other's gaze for a long moment. Public displays invite retaliation, I said. Silence invites assumption. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't trying to dominate. He was calculating a different variable. I hated that I couldn't immediately dismantle it. At sunset, floodlights illuminated the border. Killian stood before cameras and pack members alike. Calm, controlled. We do not provoke, he said evenly. But we are not invisible. No growling. No threats, just certainty. The message was clear. We see you. Back at the council hall, the atmosphere shifted. Marcus Thorne leaned forward at the long stone table, hands clasped. That's the kind of alpha presence we've been missing. Several older wolves nodded. Others exchanged uncertain glances. I remained seated, expression neutral. Visibility invites escalation, I said. Eastbrook won't appreciate being called out publicly. They'll think twice before testing us again, Marcus countered. Or they'll test harder. The room divided subtly. You could smell it. Loyalty pulling in different directions. Killian sat at the head of the table, listening. Lucas believes in containment, he said calmly. I believe in clarity. His tone wasn't dismissive. That irritated me more than disagreement would have. Containment prevents unnecessary conflict, I replied. And clarity prevents miscalculation, the council murmured. For the first time since Arthur's death, I felt it. The pack splitting along invisible lines. Teeth versus silence. Display versus strategy. Marcus looked satisfied. Velma looked intrigued. Killian looked composed. He wasn't defensive. He wasn't agitated. He was observing the division like data. And I realized something uncomfortable. He had anticipated it. When the meeting ended, wolves filed out in quiet clusters, some gravitating toward Marcus, others toward me. The air hummed with quiet alignment. Killian paused beside my chair. You think I'm reckless, he said quietly. I think you're loud. A faint smile. And yet, he murmured, you're the only one arguing with me directly. I don't argue, I said. I correct. His eyes darkened slightly. Not anger. Interest. I don't need you silent, Lucas. I met his gaze steadily. That's fortunate. He held my stare a second longer than necessary. The pack was dividing. But he wasn't threatened by it. He was measuring it. And for the first time, I wasn't entirely certain whether I was counterbalancing him or being positioned. Sabotage never announces itself. It whispers. The first whisper came in the financial archive, a temperature-controlled room beneath the administrative wing, where steel shelves held 10 years of contracts, tax filings, insurance agreements, and transaction logs. Velma was already inside when I arrived, tablet in hand, heels clicking sharply against polished concrete. You're going to love this, she said flatly. I rarely do. She handed me the screen. 3 major export contracts, timber, medical supplies, and mineral rights, showed unexpected losses over the past quarter. Significant losses. Enough to suggest fiscal mismanagement. Enough to make an alpha look careless. I scanned the figures quickly. Dates, authorization codes, signatures, Killian's digital approval stamped across the renewals. Except, the timestamps didn't align with internal meeting logs. They were altered, I said. Velma folded her arms. Yes. Recently. Yes. After his inauguration. Her eyes sharpened. That's the interesting part. Someone had retroactively edited the files. Subtle enough that a surface review would miss it. Clean enough to survive casual audit. But not mine. This isn't incompetence, I murmured. No, she agreed. It's narrative. A story being built. Killian Kane. Inexperienced alpha. Poor oversight. Declining margins. The council had been restless since the border display. This would give them numbers to attach to their unease. Who has access? I asked. Velma hesitated. Limited. Names. She sighed. Senior finance. Council oversight. You. I met her gaze evenly. You think I'd sabotage him? I think, she said carefully. Someone wants it to look like you wouldn't need to. That was when I understood. This wasn't about making Killian fail. It was about creating an alternative. And I was the most convenient one. By evening, I was in the underground storage facilities, walking the dim corridors where supply shipments were tracked and distributed. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The air smelled of oil and dust. One of the warehouse supervisors approached nervously. Sir, there's something else. He showed me a damaged manifest. Shipments misrouted, signatures forged again. Sloppy enough to be traced. But only if someone looked. The sabotage wasn't just financial. It was structural. Slow fractures along load-bearing beams. Internal. I leaned against a stack of sealed crates. Mind-mapping connections. Someone with access. Someone senior enough to manipulate oversight channels. Someone who believed the pack needed stronger leadership. Lucas. Marcus Thorne's voice carried easily in the hollow space. He approached with deliberate steps. Tall, broad, silver threading through dark hair. His presence always felt slightly too heavy, as if he wanted the room to remember him. I hear we're bleeding money, he said casually. Rumors travel fast. They travel faster when numbers support them. I studied him. Marcus valued hierarchy above all else. He believed strength should be visible, unquestionable. He also believed betas were dangerous precisely because we didn't crave titles. You've always kept the pack stable, he continued. Some of us think stability matters more than theatrics. There it was, the offer without saying it. I serve the pack, I replied. As do I, Marcus said smoothly. But sometimes the pack needs correction. Correction, I repeated. He held my gaze. A strong interim leader, perhaps. Until the boy learns. The implication hung between us. Interim. Me. Disgust rolled through my chest, sharp and immediate. I am not interested in symbolism, I said coldly. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. You underestimate your influence. I understand it perfectly. He stepped closer. The council is concerned. The council, I said evenly, is always concerned. He watched me for a long moment before nodding once and walking away. I remained where I was, pulse steady but mind racing. They didn't want me because I was alpha material. They wanted me because I was controllable. A stabilizing figure. A compromise. A shadow with a crown. The thought made my skin crawl. Back upstairs, I passed clusters of council members speaking in low tones. Eyes flicked toward me, then away. Whispers. Calculations. Killian's name carried faintly through the hallway, followed by mine. The fracture had begun, and for the first time since Arthur's death, I felt something dangerously close to anger, not because they doubted Killian, but because they assumed I would step into his place, as if I had been waiting for it. I don't want the throne. I built the system so no one would need to fight for it, which meant one thing. This wasn't a test of Killian. It was a test of loyalty, and someone inside these walls was counting on me to fail it. Fire has a language. It doesn't scream at first. It breathes. I smelled it before the alarms triggered. Smoke curling through the ventilation shafts, sharp and chemical beneath the usual scent of treated wood and metal. By the time I reached the lower industrial district, flames were licking up the side of Warehouse 3. Orange light fractured against steel walls, reflecting violently into the night. Enforcers were already forming a perimeter. Someone shouted orders. Sprinklers kicked in too late. Too precisely late. I scanned the structure automatically. The east exit was blocked, a security captain reported. Internal locking system overridden. From inside? I asked. He hesitated. Yes. The fire department wolves moved efficiently. No panic. No chaos. But this wasn't random. This was choreography. Casualties? I asked. One injured. My jaw tightened. Who? Evan Mercer. Of course. Evan had been openly supportive of Killian since the border demonstration. Young, sharp, loyal, too visible. I found him near the ambulances, blood dark against his shirt, shoulder wound deep, but clean. Not fire damage. Blade. Eastbrook? One of the enforcers muttered. No, I said immediately. The cut was angled inward, controlled. Close range, not territorial violence. Personal. Calculated. I straightened just as headlights swept across the lot. Killian's SUV. He stepped out without urgency. No shouting. No display of outrage. Just stillness. The flames reflected in his eyes. But his pulse, even from where I stood, didn't spike. You're calm, I said when he approached. Should I be loud? He replied quietly. An alpha whose warehouse is burning usually is. His gaze shifted to the building. Anger wastes oxygen. I watched him closely. Too composed. Too prepared. Evan tried to sit up when Killian approached. Alpha. Lie down, Killian said, voice firm but not raised. You'll live. The reassurance was simple, effective, but something underneath it felt measured, as if this scene confirmed something he already knew. External sabotage? One of the security heads asked. Killian's eyes flicked briefly toward me. What do you think, Lucas? Everyone nearby stilled slightly. He was making me visible. I studied the scene again. Fire origin point. Lock override. Blade wound. Timing. Shortly after the financial discrepancies began circulating among council members. Not external, I said. A few enforcers exchanged looks. Eastbrook marked the fence. Someone insisted. They didn't breach it, I replied. This fire started from inside the logistics corridor. Someone with access. Silence. Smoke drifted upward, thick and dark. Killian stepped closer. Not touching, not crowding. Just enough that I felt the shift in air pressure between us. Internal? He asked softly. Yes. And motive? To destabilize you. His gaze sharpened. And to elevate you. There it was. The pattern snapped into place so cleanly it almost felt insulting. Damage infrastructure. Question leadership. Injure loyalists. Whisper about stability. Offer the strategist as solution. I felt heat rise beneath my collar. Not from the fire. From insult. They're building a narrative, I said quietly. Financial incompetence, security vulnerability, emotional inexperience, and you, Killian said, voice steady, are the counterweight. My eyes met his. They expect me to accept it. And will you? The question hung low between us. For a split second, the wolf inside me reacted. Instinct recognizing proximity, strength, the subtle gravitational pull of an alpha who didn't assert dominance through noise. My heartbeat shifted. Not faster, deeper. Annoying. You're remarkably calm, I said instead of answering. A faint smile ghosted across his mouth. I was waiting. For what? For them to escalate. The words landed heavily. You knew this would happen, I said. I knew it might, and you let it. His jaw tightened slightly. First crack in composure. I needed to see who moved first. My pulse sharpened. So Evan is bait? No, Killian said sharply. Evan is collateral. The correction came fast, controlled but real. I studied him again. He wasn't surprised by the fire. He wasn't surprised by the blade. He was confirming variables. You're being very careful, I said. I have to be, because... His gray eyes locked onto mine, steady and unflinching. Because I can't afford to misjudge you. The words struck harder than they should have. The space between us felt charged, heat under skin, instinct stirring in quiet, dangerous ways. I don't misalign easily, I said evenly. No, he agreed. You don't. Smoke curled past us in thick waves. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Council members were already arriving, murmuring in tense clusters. Marcus stood near the perimeter, expression grave but eyes calculating. He was watching me. Not the fire. Me. That confirmed it. They wanted me positioned, visibly aligned, publicly concerned, ready to step in. Killian leaned slightly closer, voice low enough that only I could hear. They think you'll choose order over loyalty. I choose structure, I replied. And I, he said quietly, am not your structure. The wolf inside me bristled at that, not defensively. Instinctively, I hated it. The fire began to die down, replaced by steam and smoke. The fracture beneath the pack floor wasn't subtle anymore. It was burning, and someone expected me to stand in the smoke and claim the throne they were dismantling. They miscalculated one thing. I don't step into power that's handed to me, especially not when it smells like manipulation. By the next morning, the council hall felt smaller, not physically, politically. Whispers had thickened overnight. Financial discrepancies, a warehouse fire, an injured loyalist, a young alpha in over his head. The narrative was spreading exactly as intended. I stood at the far end of the long stone table while council members filed in. Marcus Thorne took a seat 2 chairs from the head, posture confident, eyes sharp. Killian entered last. He didn't rush, didn't attempt to dominate the room with presence. He simply took his place at the head of the table and folded his hands. Let's begin, he said. Marcus leaned forward first. We have instability on multiple fronts, financial inconsistencies, border provocations, now arson inside our own territory, which suggests internal compromise. Killian replied calmly. A few council members shifted uneasily. You admit that? Marcus pressed. I acknowledge it. I watched Killian closely. Still no sign of agitation, That, more than anything, unsettled me. You should have anticipated escalation, I said evenly. The room stilled. This wasn't subtle disagreement anymore. It was accusation. Killian's gaze shifted to mine. I did, he said. And yet, I continued, we have a warehouse burned and a man stabbed. You believe that's incompetence? I believe, I said coolly, that visible instability weakens confidence. A murmur rippled across the table. Marcus's eyes gleamed. Good. Push him. Force him to respond. Force him to show crack lines. Killian leaned back slightly in his chair. You think I need to control you? He asked quietly. The question caught the room off guard. I didn't blink. All alphas do. A faint, almost amused exhale. Not this one. Silence. He stood then, walking slowly toward the wall-length screen behind the head of the table. He tapped the remote. Footage appeared. Timestamps, access logs, security feeds. Warehouse 3, Financial Archive, Council Hallway. You think I didn't know? He said calmly. My pulse tightened. I've been tracking your regular access for 2 weeks. Marcus shifted in his seat. Killian continued, voice level. The financial edits were traced to a council-level override. The warehouse lock was disengaged by a senior clearance code. He paused deliberately. I let it continue. The room inhaled sharply. You let... I began. Yes. His eyes found mine again. I needed them to escalate. Heat rose behind my ribs. You risked infrastructure, personnel. I calculated the threshold, he replied. I increased security around anyone openly aligned with me. Evan was stabbed. And he survived, Killian said quietly. Because I ensured medical teams were positioned closer than usual, my mind raced through the past 72 hours. Increased patrol rotations, unexpected system audits, Killian's unusual calm at the fire. He wasn't reacting. He was confirming. You're playing with live variables, I said coldly. I'm isolating threats. Marcus stood abruptly. This is reckless. You endangered the pack for a theory. Killian turned his attention to him. Not aggressive, not loud. Marcus, he said evenly. Your clearance code accessed the financial archive at 2:14 a.m. 3 nights ago. The room froze. Marcus's jaw tightened. I oversee oversight. Not alone, Killian replied. And not unrecorded. He tapped the remote again. Footage appeared. Marcus in the corridor outside the archive. Not entering, but speaking to someone who did. The fracture beneath the pack floor split audibly. You staged this, Marcus accused. No, Killian said. You did. Security stepped forward. Marcus's expression shifted from indignation to calculation in a blink. You think exposing me stabilizes anything? He said sharply. The pack doubts you. Good, Killian replied. Now they know why. Silence swallowed the room. I stared at him. He hadn't panicked, hadn't reacted emotionally. He had waited long enough to identify every participant in the narrative being built. You used me, I said quietly. He didn't deny it. I trusted you to stay objective. That's not trust. It is, he said, because I knew you wouldn't jump at the offer. The words struck deeper than they should have. You're very certain of me. I studied you, he said simply. My jaw tightened. You allowed the council to believe I was positioning myself. I allowed them to test you. Anger flared, controlled but real. And if I had accepted, his gray eyes held mine steadily. You wouldn't have. The certainty unsettled me more than any insult could have. Security escorted Marcus out, tension thick and electric. The room slowly began to empty. I remained standing. You risked structural integrity to expose dissent, I said. Yes, and you never told me. If I had, he replied calmly, you would have tried to prevent escalation. He wasn't wrong. That realization irritated me profoundly. I don't like being maneuvered, I said. I don't like being underestimated. The words hovered between us. You're not reckless, I said finally. No, you're patient. A faint nod. I wait, he said quietly. Until the right move matters. For the first time since Arthur's death, something shifted inside me. Not surrender, not admiration, but doubt. I had assumed he was young, reactive, dependent on spectacle. Instead, he had been 3 steps ahead. And he hadn't tried to dominate me. He had anticipated me, which meant my initial assessment might have been wrong, and I don't make mistakes lightly. He stepped closer, voice low. I don't need to control you, Lucas. The wolf inside me stirred again. Not in resistance. In recognition. For the first time, he added quietly, I need you choosing to stand here. I held his gaze. And for the first time, I wasn't entirely certain I was the one in control. Night quieted the building. From the outside, the council tower looked like a shard of glass embedded in the hill. Dark, except for the upper floors where light still glowed behind wide panes. Beyond it, the forest stretched endless and black, the wind combing through pine in long, low sighs. I stepped onto the balcony to breathe. After Marcus's removal, the pack felt temporarily stable. But tension doesn't evaporate. It shifts shape. It waits, much like its alpha. The air was cold enough to sting my lungs. I welcomed it. It sharpened thought, suppressed instinct. Footsteps sounded behind me. Measured, unhurried. I didn't turn. You don't sleep, Killian said. I do. Rarely. Efficiently. He came to stand beside me, forearms resting lightly on the stone railing. The city lights flickered faintly in the distance, but up here it was mostly forest and shadow. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. That was the problem. You're angry, he said finally. I dislike being maneuvered. I didn't maneuver you. You withheld variables. That's different. I glanced sideways at him, only to someone who enjoys risk. He exhaled softly, breath visible in the cold air. I enjoy clarity. You engineered chaos to achieve it. I contained chaos, he corrected. The wolf inside me stirred at his proximity, subtle, low in my spine. Heat, beneath the skin, irritating, predictable. I shifted slightly away. He noticed. Of course he did. You don't trust proximity, he said quietly. I don't trust dependency. I'm not asking for it. His shoulder brushed mine, not accidentally. The contact was brief, electric. My pulse deepened, not faster but heavier, as if something ancient inside me recognized a presence stronger than simple physical nearness. Alpha. Not loud, not domineering. Just there. I hated the way my body registered it before my mind did. You're reacting, he murmured. I'm cold. A faint smile. No, you're not. His scent was sharper at this distance. Cedar, rain, something darker underneath. Not overwhelming. Not forced. That made it worse. My instincts pushed in 2 directions at once. Stand ground. Yield. The second impulse burned. I straightened, forcing distance between us. Say what you came to say, I said evenly. He turned toward me fully now. I don't want you under me. The phrasing tightened something in my chest. Careful, I said. He didn't flinch. I don't want you beneath my authority, he clarified. I want you beside it. The wind cut across the balcony again, colder this time. You already have my counsel, I replied. That's not what I'm asking for. My jaw tightened. You want control without resistance, I said. No, he said calmly. I want alignment without suppression. I laughed softly. That's not how hierarchy works. Then, we change it. The confidence in his tone was infuriating. You don't change centuries of structure because you feel inspired, I said. I'm not inspired, he replied. I'm certain. He stepped closer again, too close. Heat radiated from him, steady and contained. My wolf pressed against my ribs, restless. There was an instinctive impulse to lower my gaze. I didn't. He noticed that too. You think I'm trying to break you, he said quietly. Every alpha tries. Not this one. His voice wasn't dominant. It was resolute. And that unsettled me more than aggression ever could. I don't need to control you, he continued. I need you choosing to stand with me. Choosing. Choice implies vulnerability, dependence, intertwining structure with another person's decisions. I took a step back. No, I said. His expression didn't harden. That almost made it worse. You'd rather stand alone, he observed. Yes, even if it weakens you. I don't weaken. He held my gaze, gray eyes steady and searching. Everyone does, he said softly. When they refuse partnership, I felt it then. Not submission, not surrender. Fear, not of him, of what it would mean to rely on someone who understood my architecture this precisely. I won't be absorbed into someone else's legacy, I said. You won't, he replied. You'd redefine it. That almost made me hesitate. I turned away first. I don't function inside emotional leverage, I said. Good, he answered quietly. Neither do I. I walked back toward the doors without looking at him again. The wolf inside me remained restless long after I left the balcony. And for the first time since Arthur's death, the fracture wasn't political. It was internal. The coup didn't begin with shouting. It began with silence. At 7:12 p.m., the internal network flickered. At 7:13, 3 security feeds went dark. At 7:14, my phone stopped receiving encrypted updates from the North Wing. Precision. I was in my office reviewing border supply projections when the disruption hit. No alarms yet. Just absence. Which meant someone had overridden the system manually. I was already moving before the first crash echoed down the corridor. The council hall. Of course. By the time I reached the main floor, the air had shifted. Sharp, electric, metallic with rising aggression. Wolves clustered in tense formations near the entrance. 2 enforcers lay unconscious against the wall. Not dead. Controlled damage. Marcus wasn't reckless. He was strategic enough to minimize collateral and maximize optics. The glass doors to the council hall were sealed. From inside, I scanned the overhead camera panel. Offline. They'd isolated the room. Not chaos. Containment. They were forcing confrontation. My pulse remained steady. Inside that hall was Killian. And a room full of wolves waiting to see whether strength came with teeth or with fracture. I accessed the maintenance console embedded in the wall and began rerouting internal communications manually. Whoever had cut the network relied on centralized relay. A mistake. I built redundancies for exactly this reason. Within 40 seconds, I reactivated 3 peripheral channels, enough to disrupt encrypted communications between conspirators. The hall doors shook from inside. A body slammed into the glass. Not Killian. One of Marcus's supporters. I disengaged the lock override. The doors parted. The room inside was controlled violence. Chairs overturned. Stone floor cracked in 2 places. Wolves circling in tight formations. Marcus stood at the center, coat discarded, posture dominant. Killian stood opposite him. No blood on either of them yet. That's far enough, Marcus said sharply when he saw me enter. Interesting. He hadn't expected me so quickly. You're early, I replied calmly. This doesn't concern you. It concerns structural stability, I said. Which is my domain. Several wolves shifted uneasily. Marcus's jaw tightened. Your alpha is inexperienced, he announced loudly. He allowed instability to fester. Killian didn't interrupt, didn't growl, didn't posture. He simply watched. You staged sabotage, I said evenly. You attempted narrative manipulation. Marcus's eyes flashed. The pack needs visible strength. And you think killing him provides it? I asked. The word kill rippled through the room like an exposed wire. Marcus didn't deny it. He stepped forward. I think the pack needs certainty. And you believe that's you? I said. It's not about me, Marcus snapped. It's about hierarchy. The wolves closest to him began to shift. Subtle physical preparation, not full transformation, just readiness. I calculated the room in seconds. 6 aligned with Marcus. 4 undecided. 3 already injured. Security outside would take 90 seconds to breach if I signaled. Too long. Marcus moved first. Fast. He lunged toward Killian, not with brute force, but angled for the throat. Clean, efficient elimination. I reacted before conscious thought intervened. I stepped between them, not physically blocking. That would have been foolish. I pivoted, redirecting Marcus's trajectory just enough to break the clean line of attack. He collided with the stone table instead, cracking its edge. Killian moved instantly, controlled and precise, restraining Marcus's wrist without escalating to lethal force. The room erupted. 2 wolves aligned with Marcus rushed forward. I barked a single command. Lights. The overhead system shut down. Darkness swallowed the hall. Confusion is a weapon. I knew the layout intimately. Blind spots, structural columns, acoustic distortion from the curved ceiling. Marcus's wolves relied on visual cues. Killian didn't. He moved through the dark like he'd rehearsed it. A body hit the floor. Another. I reactivated only the emergency side lighting, angled beams that distorted shadows. Disorientation spread. You don't need to die for pride. Killian's voice cut through the room, steady and unraised. Marcus snarled. You're weak. I'm patient. Marcus lunged again. This time Killian didn't redirect. He stopped him. Not brutally, not theatrically. He immobilized him. Clean, dominant, efficient. Security burst through the doors seconds later, weapons drawn but unnecessary. The hall settled into heavy silence. Marcus knelt, restrained, breathing hard. The wolves who'd aligned with him looked less certain now. Killian released Marcus slowly, stepping back without spectacle. You mistook restraint for fragility, he said quietly. Marcus glared at him. Then at me. You could have ended this earlier, Marcus spat. You chose him. The accusation hung in the air. Chose him. I hadn't. Consciously. I'd chosen stability, structure, continuity, but standing there, adrenaline cooling in my bloodstream, one realization cut through the haze. When Marcus lunged, I hadn't protected the throne. I had protected Killian. The distinction mattered. Security escorted Marcus and his closest supporters out. The remaining wolves stood uncertain, recalibrating loyalty in real time. Killian's breathing was steady again. No visible tremor. He approached me slowly once the room cleared. You stepped in, he said. You miscalculated the timing, I replied automatically. A faint smile. Did the first? I didn't answer. The cracked stone table lay between us, physical evidence of fracture. You didn't have to intervene, he continued. Yes, I said quietly. I did, because if Marcus had succeeded, the pack would have fractured permanently. Because if Marcus had succeeded, the future I had begun unwillingly recalculating would have ended before it began. Killian studied me carefully. You disabled their communications, he said. Yes, you knew I'd move in the dark. I knew you'd adapt. A pause. The air between us still hummed faintly with residual adrenaline. You didn't protect power tonight, he said softly. I met his gaze. No. You protected me. I didn't deny it, and that frightened me more than the coup ever could have. Because instinct is honest, and mine had already chosen a side. The council hall smelled like ozone and dust after the fight. Cracked stone, scraped wood, displaced chairs, order disrupted, but not destroyed. Security escorted the last of Marcus's loyalists out under watch. The remaining council members lingered at the edges, unsure whether to approach or retreat. Killian dismissed them with a quiet nod. Tomorrow, he said evenly, we'll discuss structural reform. Structural reform. Not punishment, not dominance. Reform. When the doors finally closed and silence settled, it felt heavier than the conflict had. I stood near the shattered table, fingers resting against cool stone. You knew, I said without looking at him. Yes. How long? He didn't answer immediately. Long enough. I turned. That's not specific. No, he agreed. It's not. He walked toward the balcony doors but didn't open them, just stopped with the forest visible beyond the glass. My father began preparing me when I was 19, he said calmly. Arthur Kane had never struck me as sentimental. For leadership? I asked. For survival. A faint shift in his expression. Not softness, not regret. Something more complicated. He knew the pack was stable because of you, Killian continued. Not because of him. I held his gaze. Careful. It's fact. He stepped closer, though not invading my space this time. He made me study every negotiation you conducted, every contract revision, every territorial concession. My pulse shifted. That was oversight training, I said. It was more than that. He paused deliberately. He told me this pack didn't need another dominant wolf at the front. It needed someone who understood the architecture. The word landed precisely. Architecture. That's your domain, he said quietly. And he knew it. Arthur Kane had rarely acknowledged my contributions openly. He valued results, not sentiment. You're telling me your father planned this, I said. He planned transition, Killian corrected. He didn't trust the council. He knew they would test me, and you allowed them to. Yes, to prove what? That I wasn't naive, and that I wasn't ambitious enough to betray you. The air tightened. Betray me, I repeated. Killian's gray eyes held steady. You were the real variable, he said. Not Marcus, not the council. Me. If you'd accepted their offer, he continued, this pack would have fractured permanently. You're very certain I wouldn't. Yes. Why? His answer came without hesitation. Because you don't want the throne. It wasn't accusation. It was understanding. You want structure, he went on. Not spectacle, not worship, not control. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not pride. Exposure. You think you know me, I said. I studied you. You've said that before, and I meant it. He stepped closer now. Not dominant, not demanding. Intent. My father told me one thing before he died, Killian said quietly. He said, if Lucas ever stands beside you willingly, you'll know you've earned it. The words hit harder than any blow Marcus had thrown. Willingly. Earned. He didn't want you as an instrument, Killian added. He wanted you as a partner. Partner. The word unsettled me more than coup or sabotage ever had. I don't need obedience, Killian said softly. I need alignment. Silence stretched between us. I had spent years perfecting distance, maintaining control, designing systems that didn't rely on trust. Trust is leverage. Trust is exposure. And yet, he had known. For years, he hadn't tried to overpower me. He hadn't tried to discredit me. He had waited. You made your choice tonight, he said quietly. I protected structural stability, I replied automatically. A faint smile. No, he said. You protected me. The vulnerability that followed wasn't dramatic. It wasn't explosive. It was quiet and terrifying. Because he was right, and for the first time in years, I didn't know how to pretend he wasn't. The council hall had been repaired overnight. Cracked stone replaced. Glass polished. The long table restored, not identical, but deliberate. Stronger reinforcement beneath the surface. Symbolism matters. The pack gathered again under the high ceilings and wide windows. Morning light poured across the floor, clean and unapologetic, as if the building itself refused to acknowledge last night's fracture. I stood in my usual place. Second row, left side, familiar, safe. Marcus's seat was empty. Security flanked the room, not aggressively, just visibly. Killian entered without escort. No fanfare. No raised voice. He didn't take his seat immediately. He stood at the center of the hall instead, not behind the table, not elevated. Among us. The events of last night were not a failure of structure, he began calmly. They were a failure of alignment. The word landed carefully. Marcus Thorne believed visible dominance would stabilize this pack. A faint ripple of discomfort. He was wrong. Silence followed. Not hostile. Not supportive. Evaluating. We do not stabilize through fear, Killian continued. We stabilize through precision. His gaze moved across the room, council members, enforcers, trade leaders. Then it found me, and held. There is one person in this pack who understands our architecture better than anyone else. I felt it immediately, the shift in attention, the subtle pivot of bodies, the scent of anticipation tightening the air. Lucas Vale, Killian said clearly. The name echoed off glass and stone. I didn't move. He stepped closer, not toward the head of the table, toward me. This pack survived the last decade because of strategic discipline, he said, because of controlled negotiation, because of structural foresight. A few council members exchanged glances. This isn't about hierarchy, he continued. It's about sustainability. He stopped a few feet in front of me, close enough that I could see the faint tension in his jaw, not nerves, commitment. I am Alpha, he said evenly, and I remain so. A subtle tightening rippled through the room. But I will not lead alone. There it was. The fracture point, effective immediately, Killian continued, voice steady. Lucas Vale stands beside me as official strategic partner of this pack. A wave of shock rolled outward, not loud, but unmistakable. Velma's eyes widened slightly. One of the older council members inhaled sharply. Not beneath, not subordinate. Beside. The distinction was seismic. He does not answer to me as a subordinate advisor, Killian said. He holds equal authority over structural policy and long-term governance. Silence thickened. The hierarchy was shifting in real time, not dethroning the Alpha, redefining him. You cannot, one council member began. I can, Killian replied calmly, because strength is not diminished by shared intellect. His gaze returned to me. Lucas built the foundation. I intend to build the future with him. With him, not over him. The air felt heavier suddenly, warmer, binding. I stepped forward slowly, not because I wanted to, because if I remained still, the moment would swallow me. Are you certain? I asked quietly enough that only those closest could hear. Yes. You're tying your authority to mine. I'm aligning it. The room watched like predators scenting a shift in territory. I felt something I rarely allow myself to feel. Fear. Not of the council. Not of rebellion. Of permanence. Of being anchored. Authority alone is fluid, untethered, adaptable. Shared authority is commitment. If he faltered, I would fall with him. If I miscalculated, he would bear it. Control disperses when shared. I have spent years perfecting control. You could keep me as an advisor, I said softly. Cleaner. Yes, he agreed. But weaker. The certainty in his voice struck deeper than the declaration itself. He wasn't elevating me to neutralize threat. He was doing it because he believed the structure required it. Believed I required it. The pack still watched, waiting to see whether I would accept or fracture the room again. I turned slowly to face them. Dozens of eyes, calculation, doubt, curiosity. The balance had shifted. Not away from Killian, toward something else, something unprecedented. My pulse beat once, heavy and deliberate. I had never feared power, but I feared dependence. And this was both. Killian's voice came quiet, meant only for me. I don't want you beneath me, Lucas. I met his gaze. I want you beside me. The choice wasn't about ambition. It was about trust, and I wasn't sure which one terrified me more. I didn't answer him in the hall. I couldn't. Instead, I left. Not dramatically. Not in anger. I simply walked past the council doors, down the stone steps, beyond the security perimeter, and into the forest that wrapped our territory like a living border. The air changed immediately. Cooler, quieter, honest. Pine needles softened my steps. Damp earth carried the scent of moss and rain. No politics here. No eyes calculating leverage, just distance. I walked until the glass tower disappeared behind trees. Only then did I stop. For years, I had told myself I didn't want the throne. That was true. But it wasn't the full truth. I didn't want the throne because it was visible. Visibility invites vulnerability, so I built something better. Systems, protocols, redundancies, architecture, power without spotlight, control without exposure. It had been armor. If I stayed the strategist, the shadow, I could influence outcomes without being bound to anyone. If an alpha failed, I could adapt, detach, rebuild. Independence disguised as discipline. A wind moved through the trees, low and steady. I inhaled deeply. The wolf inside me stirred. Not restless now, but thoughtful. Killian hadn't tried to absorb me into his authority. He hadn't demanded submission. He had offered alignment. There was a difference. Control hoarded is rigid. Control shared requires trust, and trust has always been my weakest structure. He wasn't taking my autonomy. He was redistributing weight. If I stood beside him, I wouldn't lose control. I would lose isolation. The realization settled slowly. Isolation had protected me, but it had also limited me. The pack didn't need a shadow anymore. It needed coherence, and coherence meant stepping into visibility, not as a symbol, as a partner. I looked back toward where the tower would be beyond the trees. The choice wasn't about hierarchy. It was about whether I believed in the architecture enough to stand inside it, and whether I believed in him enough to share it. For the first time in years, the answer wasn't purely strategic. When I returned, the council hall was empty, deliberately so. Killian had dismissed them. He was on the balcony. Of course he was. The glass doors were open this time. Night air flowed freely through the office, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. He didn't turn when I stepped outside. I assumed you'd need quiet, he said. I did, and I dislike when you're right. A soft huff of laughter. That's becoming a pattern. I moved to stand beside him. Not in my old position behind his shoulder. Beside him. The forest stretched out below us, dark and steady. The pack territory lights flickered in careful grids. Supply hubs, border checkpoints, residential clusters, architecture, ours. You made a public declaration, I said. Yes. You realize retracting it would be complicated. I don't retract structural decisions. I studied his profile in the low light, calm, assured, infuriatingly composed. You tied your authority to mine, I said. I aligned it. That's not how tradition works. Tradition nearly fractured us. Fair. I inhaled slowly. This changes perception. It changes function, he corrected. And if I disagree with you publicly, then we debate publicly. You won't override? No. You won't expect submission? No. A pause. And if I tell you you're wrong? A faint smirk touched his mouth. I'd prefer it be accompanied by data. I almost smiled. Almost. You realize the council will test this structure, I said. They already are. And if it fails? Then we adjust it. He turned toward me fully then. You're not beneath me, Lucas, he said quietly. You never were. The wolf inside me stirred, not with resistance. With steadiness. A decision settled into place. Not impulsive, not emotional. Architectural. I'll stand beside you, I said evenly. Not for spectacle, not for loyalty theater. For alignment. For coherence. For the future we had already begun constructing whether I admitted it or not. Killian's shoulders relaxed almost imperceptibly. I was hoping you would, he said. Careful, I replied dryly. Hope is inefficient. Not always. I glanced at him. You're aware this means I'll correct you without hesitation. I'd be concerned if you didn't, and I expect full transparency. You'll have it, and if you ever attempt to maneuver me again, I won't. We held each other's gaze for a long moment. Equal, not dominance, not submission. Balance. From somewhere deep in the forest, a howl rose. Low. Strong. Another answered. Then another. Within seconds, the sound rolled through the territory. Not chaotic, not fragmented. Unified. Recognition. Acceptance. Killian leaned lightly against the railing. Well, he said, that's a promising review. You're insufferable. You returned. Yes. He glanced sideways at me. So, he said casually, am I the decorative part now? I allowed myself a faint smile. Careful, I replied. That would imply I'm the brain. And are you? Obviously. He laughed. Not loud, not theatrical. Real. The pack's howl continued below us, carrying through the night air like a living pulse. The structure had shifted. Not because one alpha fell. Not because another rose. But because power had been redefined. For the first time, I wasn't the shadow behind the throne. I was the mind beside it.